Hi, ducks. Welcome to another lesson of understanding decimals. Today in Duckflix, we are going to learn how to write zeros in dividends. Let's take a minute to review our lesson 5.7 scale. By the end of this lesson, we want you to be able to divide decimals to the hundredths using standard algorithm and understand the relevance of placing zeros in the dividend in order to write remaining numbers as a decimal. Because when we're working with decimals, we are not going to write our remainder as a fraction. So we need to figure out how are we going to work with the numbers that are remaining in the dividend. And our solution to that is that we're going to be writing zeros. Take a minute to pause the video and record your scale in your notebook. Okay, let's go ahead and have a brief introduction to some questions that we can ask ourselves and the thinking that we can use when we're deciding when is it appropriate to place zeros in the dividend in order to complete our division problem when we are working with decimals. So first, you need to ask yourself, when do you write a zero in the dividend to find a quotient? Because we've been doing a lot of division and sometimes we don't need to place a zero to complete the division. So today I'm going to show you when and how. So we're going to think to ourselves, does my dividend have enough digits? Okay, that's your key word there for me to complete the division problem. If you do not have enough digits in your original dividend to complete the division problem, then there's an easy fix. What you're going to do is you're going to write zeros to the right of the last digit behind the decimal point in order to complete your division. And that's what we're going to be working on today. Okay, let's review very quickly for a basic understanding of equivalent decimals. If I have 0.3, believe it or not, that is equal to 0.30, which is also equal to 0.300. And I'm going to show you in a fraction. So 0.3 is equal to 3/10. And 0.30 is equal to 30 hundredths. And 0.300 is equal to 300,000. And when we're working in fractions, you can eliminate some of the zeros. And what are we left with? Voila, 3/10, 3/10, 3/10. So you can see that these decimals, or in fraction form, are equivalent. And that's going to help you understand why when we're placing the zeros, we are not changing the value of the number. Okay, and I put a note down here for you. When we're placing zeros after the last number in the dividend, it will not affect the value of the number. Okay, let's take a look at our first problem. So in this problem, we are going to have an example where the dividend is a decimal. So let's review which number is the dividend. 45.8 is our dividend, and 4 is our divisor. And so for this problem, because our divisor, this is very important when we are dividing decimals, is a whole number, we don't need to use our powers of 10 in order to move the decimals before we get started. We can go ahead and just do our division, but we need to remember the placement of this decimal. So if I have 45.8 and I am dividing by 4, then we're going to ask ourselves, we're just going to do straight division. And it's a good rule of thumb to just go ahead and move your decimal directly above where it is placed in the dividend. So place it up in the quotient in the exact same spot. And in order to do the math, very simple, just long division, standard algorithm. We could say 4 goes into 4 one time, or we're fifth graders, so we could say 4 goes into 45 11 times, because we know that 4 times 11 is 44. Subtract. I'm going to bring down my 8. 4 goes into 18 4 times. 4 times 4 is 16. I have 2. This is very important for this skill. Oops. If we can see the 2 down in our remaining dividend is smaller than the 4 over here in our divisor, this is where we start placing zeros. When the number down here in the remaining dividend is smaller, because remember, we are not going to interpret this as a fraction. We're going to continue until we have a beautiful decimal. So the next step is going to be to place a 0 here. Remember, I'm not changing the value of this number. When I bring down a 0, now I have 4 goes into 20, and 4 goes into 20 evenly. So 5 times 4 times 5 is 20. And if I do the subtraction, I have 0 left over. So our answer, or our quotient, is 11.45. Next, let's look at another I do. This time our dividend is a whole number. In the last problem, it was a decimal. So for this problem, we are going to write zeros in the dividend until we have a decimal that has no numbers remaining in the dividend. So let's go ahead and write our problem out. We have 372 divided by 15. We don't have any decimals to deal with right now. So what we're going to do is just do our normal long division. So 15 goes into 3. It can't do it. So 15 goes into 37 2 times. 15 times 2 is 30. 37 minus 30 is 7. We need to bring down our 2. Now we're going to ask ourselves, how many times does 15 go into 72? It can go in 4 times. 15 times 4 is 60. If we subtract, we get 12. But 12, remember, we've gotten now a number that is smaller than our divisor. So in this instance, this is the only difference, is that we need to not only place our 0, but we need to place a decimal, okay, because we are working in decimals. So I'm going to extend this out, and remember, we want to put our decimal in the quotient directly above where it is in the dividend. Okay, now we can bring down this 0, and we can continue. We can say, how many times does 15 go into 120? If you didn't know, you can do some guess and check off to the side. I know, so 15 actually goes in evenly 8 times. 15 times 8 is 120. We subtract, we have 0 left over. So our quotient is 24 8/10, or 24.8. Okay, now let's do one together, because we're going to put our understanding of decimal division that we've just been doing and our understanding of powers of 10 from the previous lessons to the test. This time you will notice that our divisor is a decimal. Okay, we cannot start our division when our divisor is a decimal number. So what we need to do is use our knowledge of powers of 10, and we need to make this decimal divisor a whole number. Well, in order to make it a whole number, we're going to move the decimal over one time because we're multiplying by 10. to get a number of 8, a divisor of 8. Well, whatever we do to the divisor, we also must do to the dividend. Believe it or not, there is an imaginary decimal right here. So if I have that imaginary decimal and I move over times 10, then the decimal point is now going to be here, and I have this empty bucket that needs to be filled with a 0. So now this problem becomes 300, that's our dividend, divided by 8. Okay, I'm going to do the math very quickly. So we have 8 goes into 30. No, that is not correct. Oops, looking at the wrong number. So 8 goes into 30 3 times. 8 times 3 is 24. Do our subtraction, bring down our 0. 8 goes into 60 7 times. 8 times 7 is 56. And I have 4. And we know that we've reached a point where what's remaining in our dividend is smaller than our divisor. So we're going to need to place a decimal and another 0. And it's just a good rule of thumb to bring your decimal up to the quotient as soon as it is placed. Now we're going to bring down our 0. And now we can continue with our division. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40. We'll do our subtraction. We come out with 0. And our quotient for this problem is 37.5. Now it's your turn to try. I would like you to solve the 2 expressions below based on what we just learned in our I do and we do, and we'll come back in a minute to check our answers. Okay, let's go ahead and check our answers real quickly. So here we have a dividend of 5.16. We have a divisor of 24 hundredths or 0.24. And we know that we cannot have a decimal as our divisor. So we're going to have to make this a whole number. In order to do that, we're going to have to move over by 2 powers of 10 to make this 24. And whatever we do to the divisor, we also need to do to the dividend. So we're going to do the same thing. And we're going to have 516. Okay, then we're going to do our math. So I'm just going to do it real quickly. You can go ahead and check that you have the same answer. If not, please write questions in your notebook. Okay, so the answer to this problem, the quotient, is 21.5. And then the next one, we have 405 is our dividend divided by 25. And we can just go ahead and start dividing because we don't have any decimals to worry about. And we've gotten to the point where we need to include another decimal and place another 0. Bring it down. And for this division problem, 16.2 would be your quotient. And I would like you to go ahead and record your final scale in your notebook, and we will see you in class tomorrow. Have a great night.